Welcome back to For Your Heart and Home. My name is Dee Dee. Welcome into my kitchen. In this Pantry Staple Series, we'll be focusing on meals built from dependable, nourishing ingredients, foods that stretch, sustain, and serve our families well. Today, we're turning towards something sweet, because pantry staples aren't only for soups and suppers, they're also for celebration. They're for gathering around the table. They're for those small, meaningful moments that make a home feel warm and loved. So today, we're making two desserts from the same foundational staple: freshly milled hard white wheat, an apple pie, and chocolate cupcakes with homemade buttercream. Both simple, both from scratch, both built from what we already keep in the pantry. Freshly milled hard white wheat is one of my favorite staples. It's versatile, nutrient-rich, and surprisingly gentle in flavor. It gives structure without heaviness and brings depth without overpowering sweetness. When we mill our own flour, we're using the whole grain, nothing stripped away. It turns something humble into something beautiful. Today, that same wheat berry becomes a flaky, tender pie crust and rich chocolate cupcakes, all from one staple. There's something deeply satisfying about that. So I've just milled my hard white wheat and we're starting with the pie crust for this apple pie. Fresh flour feels alive in your hands, soft, fragrant, slightly warm from the mill. To that flour, I'm adding cold butter, cutting it in gently until the texture resembles coarse crumbs. This is what gives us those flaky layers. A little cold water brings it together. Not too much, just enough to form a dough. Pie dough doesn't need overworking, it needs a gentle touch. I'll let this rest while I prepare the filling. For the filling, I'm using simple apples, peeled, sliced, and tossed with a bit of sweetener, warm spices, and just a touch of thickener. Nothing complicated. The freshly milled flour in the crust brings a subtle nuttiness that pairs beautifully with the sweetness of baked apples. I roll the dough out carefully, lay it on the pie dish, fill it generously, and place the top crust over everything. A few slits in the top. Today I decided to make a heart and a gentle crimp around the edges. And into the oven it goes. You can feel free to do an egg wash here. I often skip this step. There's something timeless about apple pie baking in the kitchen. It fills the air in a way that instantly softens the atmosphere of the home. While the pie bakes, we'll move to our chocolate cupcakes. Again, we'll begin with freshly milled hard white wheat. You can also substitute soft white wheat in this case. To that, I'm adding baking cocoa, a bit of salt, leavening, and a simple pantry sweetener. If you would like a full recipe, feel free to check the description box. I will be sure to link a recipe down below. These cupcakes are deeply chocolatey but not heavy. The freshly milled flour gives them structure without making them dense. As the batter comes together, it's smooth and rich. I will spoon in the cupcake into the tins and slide them into the oven. Now the kitchen carries two scents at once: warm apples and chocolate. It's the kind of afternoon that feels slow and intentional. Now for the powdered sugar. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't have any powdered sugar on hand, and I still wanted to make a deeply satisfying frosting. So I did an experiment using my grinder that I featured in my previous video. I had turbinado brown sugar on hand, and I used that in my grinder and I grounded it to powder. And that's what I will be using as my base for this frosting. So for the frosting, we're making our own powdered sugar like I explained before. Brown sugar is one of those dependable pantry staples. It's moist, it's rich, and it's full of flavor. Quite frankly, it's the only sugar I have in my pantry these days. I no longer use granulated sugar. I no longer use store-bought powdered sugar. And so this is what I reached for today when I was preparing these cupcakes. I blended it fine in my grinder and it became a nice, beautiful, soft texture, and it had a subtle caramel depth. This small step makes the frosting feel extra special, but it's still rooted in ingredients we already keep on hand. My honest opinion is that the brown sugar makes the powdered sugar quite sweet. And so if you're going to do this at home, you can play around with the quantities, you can play around with not making too much at once. But the feedback from my family was that this is a super sweet frosting, and so that's something that I have to look at the next time I do this, if I do this again. Now I wanted to create a buttercream frosting, so I made a base vanilla frosting, and then I also wanted to create one with a splash of pink. So for the simple buttercream base, I used butter, the homemade brown sugar, powdered sugar, and you can always add a splash of milk if you would like the consistency to change. I also put in a splash of vanilla, and then I just whipped it in my KitchenAid and it came together beautifully. So that was just the base for my vanilla buttercream frosting. So for the second set of frosting that I wanted to make, for that splash of color, I decided to use cranberry pulp. Now, if you followed me, you know that I've canned a lot of cranberry over the last cranberry season. And so I have some pulp left behind that I had in the freezer. I took that out. I brought it back to room temperature. On the stove, I added some sugar and some flavorings just to pull it together, almost like making a jam. And then I blended that until it was smooth. So that is what I will be adding to the vanilla-based buttercream frosting recipe to get that hint of color. There was also a slight taste of the cranberries, which wasn't overpowering at all. I think overall, the first few bites were great, but my family reported that it was very sweet as a buttercream. So that's something that definitely needs to be tweaked. I did like, however, that the cranberry provided that gentle pink color without tasting too artificial. So besides the frosting topping, I wanted to add some fun to these cupcakes, so I will be topping them with some carob chip wafers as well as some peanut butter chips. The wafers will add a soft crunch and mild bitter sweetness, while the peanut butter chips will melt right into the frosting, and this all adds to that homemade charm. And again, perfection doesn't live here. It's something I'm making for my family, something to show that I care, and my family enjoyed these two treats. If you remember from my previous video, I used carob chips to make some muffins, and so far I've used carob chips to make muffins, to make cookies, and now to top these cupcakes. I would say the best placement for these carob chips was in the cookies. So whether or not we are completely eliminating chocolate chips from our diet is still to be decided, but the carob chips worked beautifully in cookies. In muffins, I didn't feel like it changed the texture or anything very much, but it was singing very much in the cookies. So for sure, I will keep that recipe. Now to the pie, you're going to pull it from the oven when it's nice and golden and bubbly. The crust should turn a beautiful golden color and the filling should be thick and fragrant. When you bake with freshly milled flour, the crust carries a heartiness that feels grounding, less processed, and more nourishing. It's a dessert that feels substantial and intentional. So one of the things I love most about Pantry Staples is that they allow us to create moments like this without excess. We didn't need specialty flour, we didn't need store-bought frosting, and we definitely didn't need complicated ingredients. Just wheat berries, brown sugar, butter, a bit of cocoa powder, apples, and your pantry staples like salt. From these, we created something that feels abundant. Sweet things have a place in the home, not as extravagance, but as expression, as care, as joy. And when those sweets are built from staples we already trust, they feel more meaningful. So as you can see, the pie is cooling on the counter, the cupcakes are frosted and lined up, each one slightly unique. This is the kind of baking that invites people to gather, to linger, to pause for just a moment in the middle of a busy day. Pantry staples don't just sustain us through hard seasons, they also help us mark beautiful ones. Thank you for spending this time with me in the kitchen. If you've been milling your own flour, I would love to hear what you're baking lately. And if you're just starting, I hope this encourages you to see how versatile and special this staple can be. If you're new here, I would love for you to hit that subscribe button. I put out 2 videos each week on Wednesdays and on Saturdays, so look forward to another video coming soon. Until next time, keep baking from what you have, keep creating warmth in your kitchen, and keep building a home that nourishes both heart and body.